He laughed when the quiet mechanic told him to stop. A cocky black belt, undefeated in his local fights, had no idea that the man covered in engine grease had once trained Navy SEALs to survive situations where one mistake meant death. Then the mechanic stepped forward. One move, 1 second, and the black belt suddenly realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life. But what happened next was something nobody in that garage could have predicted. Before we get into the story, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss what happens when this arrogant fighter discovers who the quiet mechanic really is. The bell above the garage door rattled as Marcus Hale rolled a toolbox across the concrete floor. It was just after 9 on a rainy Tuesday morning, and the small auto repair shop was unusually quiet. The smell of motor oil, rubber, and metal filled the air while Marcus worked beneath an old pickup truck. He was 43, broad-shouldered, with weathered hands and a calm expression that rarely changed. He didn't talk much. Most people in town simply knew him as Marcus, the mechanic who could make almost anything run again. They didn't know where he'd learned to stay calm under pressure. They didn't know about the years he'd spent around military bases. And they certainly didn't know that, before opening this garage, Marcus had trained some of the toughest men in the United States military, including Navy SEALs. To Marcus, that life was over. He had no interest in medals, recognition, or telling war stories over coffee. He preferred engines. That morning, however, someone walked into the garage who was about to disturb his peaceful routine. The front door swung open. A tall man in a fitted black athletic shirt stepped inside, carrying a duffel bag over one shoulder. His name was Derek Vance. Derek was 29, a professional martial artist, a third-degree black belt, and the owner of a popular combat training academy across town. He had recently won a regional tournament and had become something of a local celebrity. Everyone knew Derek, and Derek knew it. He glanced around the greasy garage with visible disgust. "Which one of you is Marcus?" Marcus slowly slid out from beneath the truck. "That's me." Derek looked him up and down. "You the mechanic?" "Yes." Derek tossed his car keys onto the counter. "My transmission is making a noise. Fix it." Marcus picked up the keys. "I'll take a look." Derek didn't move. Instead, he noticed the faded tattoo on Marcus's forearm, a small military insignia partly hidden beneath grease. He smirked. "Military." Marcus nodded once. "Used to be." Derek laughed. "Let me guess. Some desk job." The other mechanics suddenly became very quiet. Marcus looked at him for a moment. Then he simply turned toward the vehicle. "Give me an hour." Derek grinned. "Sure, old man." Marcus said nothing. But as Derek walked away, Marcus noticed something in his stance. The way he carried his shoulders, the slight positioning of his feet, the habit of keeping his dominant hand free. Marcus recognized it immediately. Derek wasn't just a black belt. He was dangerous. But Marcus also knew something Derek didn't. He had seen men far more dangerous than Derek. And he had taught them how to fight. Marcus looked down at the car keys in his hand. For the first time that morning, a faint smile appeared on his face. Derek had no idea who he had just mocked. And he was about to find out. Derek Vance didn't leave the garage. Instead, he leaned against the waiting room wall, scrolling through his phone while Marcus inspected the transmission. Every few minutes, Derek glanced toward the service bay. He seemed to be waiting for something. Marcus noticed. He always noticed. The transmission problem was minor. A worn bearing, nothing more. But Marcus took his time examining the vehicle, partly because he believed in doing a job properly and partly because he didn't want to deal with Derek any longer than necessary. After 20 minutes, Derek finally spoke. "You really were in the military?" Marcus kept working. "Yes." "What branch?" "Army." Derek chuckled. "Army." There was something deliberately insulting in the way he said it. Marcus didn't respond. Derek continued. "I figured. SEALs are different." That made Marcus pause. Only for a second. Derek smiled. "I train former Marines and Special Operations guys at my academy. You can usually tell the difference." Marcus wiped his hands with a rag. "Can you?" "Absolutely." Derek walked closer. "They move differently. They breathe differently. Even when they're standing still, there's something about them." Marcus nodded. "That's true." Derek looked pleased with himself. "See, you understand." Marcus turned back toward the truck. I do. What Derek didn't know was that Marcus had spent years teaching elite military operators exactly how to control those things. Breathing, balance, movement, awareness. He had been an instructor at a classified military training facility where candidates were pushed beyond what most people believed the human body could tolerate. His students included Rangers, Marines, and Navy SEALs. Some had gone on to become legends inside their units. Marcus had trained them to survive when exhaustion destroyed judgment. But he never talked about it. That life belonged to another man. At least, that's what Marcus told himself. Derek wasn't finished. He pointed toward the old heavy punching bag hanging in the corner of the garage. You work out. Marcus glanced at it. Sometimes. Derek laughed. Sometimes. He walked over and slapped the bag. It swung slightly. I've been training since I was 6. Marcus said nothing. Derek stepped into a fighting stance. Then he threw 3 lightning-fast punches. Thud, thud, thud. One of the younger mechanics stared. Derek noticed. Fast enough. The mechanic nodded nervously. Derek smiled. Then he looked directly at Marcus. You should try it sometime. Marcus returned to his work. I'm good. Derek shook his head. That's the problem with old guys. They think experience makes up for speed. Marcus finally looked at him. Speed isn't everything. Derek grinned. That's what people say when they don't have any. The garage became silent. Marcus stared at him for several seconds. Then he calmly removed his grease-covered gloves. He placed them on the workbench. You're right about one thing. Derek raised an eyebrow. What's that? Marcus walked toward the punching bag. You've got speed. Derek smiled. Finally. Marcus stopped beside the bag. But you don't know what to do when someone takes it away. Derek's smile disappeared. For the first time, he wasn't looking at a mechanic. He was looking at a challenge. And Marcus could already see where this was going. Derek stared at Marcus. For several seconds, neither man spoke. The rain tapped against the garage windows while the punching bag slowly swung between them. Derek finally laughed. You serious? Marcus looked at the bag. About what? That little speech. Marcus shrugged. I wasn't giving a speech. Derek stepped closer. Then what were you doing? Observing. That answer irritated Derek more than an insult would have. He had spent years building a reputation around confidence. People came to his academy because they believed he was the toughest man in the room. And now this quiet mechanic was treating him like an interesting problem. Derek pointed at the bag. Hit it. Marcus shook his head. No need. Afraid. Marcus looked at him. No, then hit it. The younger mechanic stopped pretending to work. Everyone was watching. Marcus sighed. He stepped toward the bag. Derek folded his arms, expecting something impressive. Marcus placed one hand against the heavy bag. He didn't punch it. He simply pushed. The bag moved several inches. Derek laughed. That's it. Marcus ignored him. He walked around the bag once, studying its movement. Then he suddenly struck it. There was no dramatic wind-up, no shout, no flashy technique, just one short movement. Thump! The bag swung violently backward. Derek's expression changed. It wasn't the power that surprised him. It was the efficiency. Marcus had barely moved his shoulder. Derek stepped closer. Okay. He smiled again. Not bad. Marcus turned away, but Derek wasn't satisfied. How'd you learn that? Marcus picked up his gloves. Practice. Way. Different places. Derek narrowed his eyes. You military guys always answer questions like that. Marcus smiled faintly. Only when the questions aren't important. Derek's jaw tightened. He suddenly threw a quick jab toward Marcus's shoulder. It wasn't meant to injure him. It was meant to scare him. But Marcus moved before the punch arrived. One small step. The fist passed harmlessly through empty air. Derek froze. Marcus hadn't even looked at the punch. He had simply moved. Derek immediately threw another. Marcus slipped again. Then another. Again, Marcus moved barely an inch. The mechanic stared. Derek's face reddened. Stop moving. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You told me I was too slow. Derek lunged. This time Marcus caught his wrist. Not violently. Not even quickly. He simply intercepted the arm and turned Derek's wrist downward. Derek suddenly found himself off balance. His knees bent instinctively. Marcus released him immediately. Derek stepped backward. His breathing had changed. The confidence was still there, but now something else had appeared. Confusion. Who taught you that? Marcus looked toward the vehicle. I've had a lot of teachers. Derek shook his head. No. He stared at Marcus. That wasn't garage-level self-defense. Marcus said nothing. Derek took another step forward. Who are you? For the first time, Marcus's expression became serious. You really don't want to know? Derek smiled. Now I definitely do. Neither man noticed the older customer standing near the garage entrance. The man had heard everything, and when he saw Marcus's face, his own expression changed. He recognized him, not as a mechanic, but as the instructor whose name had once been spoken quietly inside one of the most demanding military training programs in the country. The old customer whispered to himself, "Impossible." The old customer remained frozen near the entrance. His name was Harold Pierce, a retired military contractor who had spent decades around special operations units. He stared at Marcus as if he'd seen a ghost. Marcus noticed him. Their eyes met. Harold slowly shook his head. Marcus! The garage fell silent again. Derek looked between them. You know him. Harold ignored Derek. He walked toward Marcus. I thought you were dead. Marcus sighed. Not quite. Harold gave a nervous laugh. Nobody knew where you went. I wanted it that way. Derek folded his arms. Okay, somebody want to explain. Harold finally looked at him. You don't know who you're talking to. Derek smirked. He's a mechanic. Harold's expression hardened. No, he pointed toward Marcus. He's the reason some very dangerous men learned how to stay alive. Derek's smile disappeared. Harold continued. Years ago, I worked with military training teams. Marcus was one of the best instructors I'd ever seen. Marcus shook his head. Harold. But Harold wasn't stopping. He trained reconnaissance teams, Rangers, Marines. He looked directly at Derek. And Navy SEALs. Derek stared at Marcus. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Derek laughed. You're telling me this guy trained SEALs? Harold nodded. I watched him do it. Derek looked at Marcus again. He was suddenly seeing the mechanic differently. The quiet posture, the controlled breathing, the way Marcus had avoided every punch without appearing surprised, the way he had caught Derek's wrist. Derek's pride fought against what his instincts were telling him. Why would someone like that be fixing transmissions? Harold answered before Marcus could. Because he chose to. Marcus turned toward Harold. That's enough. Harold nodded reluctantly. Derek wasn't satisfied. He stepped forward. So what happened? Marcus stared at him. Nothing happened. People like you don't just walk away. Marcus's jaw tightened. People like me. Derek realized he'd crossed another line. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. You were an instructor. Fine. But that doesn't make you unbeatable. Marcus smiled faintly. I never said it did. Derek pointed toward the empty space between the workbenches. Then prove it. Marcus shook his head. No. Why? Because this isn't a dojo. Derek laughed. Scared of embarrassing yourself. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then Harold quietly said something that changed the atmosphere. You're making a mistake, Derek. Derek turned. What? Harold stepped closer. I've seen Marcus fight. Derek smiled. So have I. No, Harold said. You've seen Marcus avoid you. Derek's expression tightened. Harold lowered his voice. You haven't seen him fight. The words hung in the air. Marcus looked down at his hands. For years, he had deliberately kept that part of himself buried. But Derek's arrogance wasn't the real problem. Marcus could see something behind it. Something he recognized from young soldiers he'd trained long ago. Overconfidence. The belief that winning fights was the same thing as understanding them. And Marcus knew exactly where that road could lead. He looked at Derek. Leave your ego outside. Derek stared back. What if I don't? Marcus's voice remained calm. Then you'll learn the hard way. Derek smiled. Good. He dropped his duffel bag onto the floor. That's what I came here for. Marcus glanced at Harold. Harold quietly stepped away from the two men. The mechanics moved backward. The garage suddenly felt much smaller. And Derek still had no idea that he had just challenged the one man who had once taught elite soldiers how to defeat opponents stronger, faster, and more dangerous than themselves. Derek stepped into the open space between the workbenches. He rolled his shoulders and raised his hands. Every movement was deliberate, confident, performative. He wanted an audience. Marcus didn't give him one. He stood several feet away, relaxed, his arms hanging naturally at his sides. Derek frowned. "You aren't even going to get into a stance." Marcus shook his head. "I don't need one." A few mechanics exchanged nervous glances. Derek laughed. "You're unbelievable." Marcus looked at him calmly. "You asked for a lesson. I asked for a fight." "No." Marcus's voice was quiet. "You asked for attention." That hit harder than any punch. Derek's face hardened. Then he moved. Fast. A jab followed by a cross. Marcus slipped the first punch and stepped outside the second. Derek immediately threw a low kick. Marcus shifted his weight. The kick missed by inches. Derek spun and attacked again. Marcus moved backward. No counterattack. No aggression. Just precise movement. Derek began breathing harder. "Stop running." Marcus replied, "I'm not running." Derek charged again. This time he threw a combination, 3 punches and a kick. Marcus blocked the first, avoided the second, redirected the third, then stepped away from the kick. Derek stopped. His eyes narrowed. "You've trained before." Marcus said nothing. Derek suddenly attacked again. But Marcus was watching something other than his fists. His shoulders, his hips, his breathing, his feet. Every attack announced itself before it happened. Marcus had spent years teaching soldiers to recognize those signals. Derek threw a right hand. Marcus caught the wrist. He turned slightly. Derek's balance disappeared. Marcus guided him forward and released him. Derek stumbled 2 steps before recovering. The garage went silent. Marcus didn't even look winded. Derek's breathing was heavier now. "You're reading me." Marcus nodded. "Everyone has patterns." Derek wiped sweat from his forehead. "I don't have patterns." Marcus almost smiled. "You do." Derek charged. This time there was anger behind the attack. He threw a hard combination and followed with a powerful kick. Marcus blocked the strike with his forearm. The impact echoed through the garage. Derek expected Marcus to retreat. Instead, Marcus stepped forward. That single movement changed everything. Marcus controlled Derek's arm, shifted his balance, and used Derek's own momentum against him. Derek hit the concrete floor with a loud thud. He immediately tried to rise. Marcus was already standing several feet away. He hadn't struck him. He hadn't humiliated him. He had simply demonstrated control. Derek pushed himself upright. His face was red with embarrassment. "You got lucky." Harold closed his eyes. Marcus sighed. "That's what everyone says after the first lesson." Derek stood. "Again." Marcus shook his head. "Enough." "No." Derek charged one more time. This time Marcus didn't move backward. He stepped directly into the attack. His hand intercepted Derek's shoulder. His other hand controlled the elbow. A quick pivot, a shift of weight, and suddenly Derek was on the floor again. Marcus held him there for exactly 2 seconds, then released him. Derek stared up at him. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what to say. Marcus extended a hand. Derek hesitated, then grabbed it. Marcus pulled him up. "You're talented," Marcus said. Derek looked surprised. But talent without discipline becomes arrogance. Derek lowered his eyes. Before he could answer, Harold's phone suddenly rang. He looked at the screen. His expression changed immediately. "Marcus." Marcus turned. "What?" Harold swallowed. "It's the old unit." Marcus went completely still. "The unit?" Harold nodded. "They're asking for you." Marcus's face lost all emotion. "Why?" Harold looked at Derek, then back at Marcus. "Because something happened overseas." The garage fell silent, and Marcus knew that the peaceful life he'd built was about to disappear. Marcus stared at Harold. For several seconds, he didn't speak. The garage seemed to disappear around him. The smell of oil, the rain, the tools, everything faded beneath the weight of those 3 words. The old unit. Marcus had spent 12 years making sure nobody could find him. He had changed cities, changed careers, stopped answering military calls, stopped visiting old colleagues. He had convinced himself that chapter of his life was finished. Apparently, the past hadn't agreed. What happened? Marcus finally asked. Harold lowered his voice. One of your former students is missing. Marcus's expression tightened. Who? Daniel Cross. Marcus immediately recognized the name. Daniel had been 23 when Marcus first met him. Quiet, disciplined, relentless, a young operator with extraordinary potential. Marcus had personally trained him during a specialized combat course. He remembered the final day clearly. Daniel had stood in front of him, exhausted and bruised, refusing to quit. Marcus had told him something he never forgot. Strength isn't what keeps you alive. Judgment does. Now Daniel was missing. How long? Marcus asked. 48 hours. Marcus looked toward the garage door. Way. Overseas. Harold hesitated. That's all they'll tell me. Marcus knew what that meant. If the details were being kept that tightly controlled, the situation was serious. Derek stood several feet away, listening. The arrogance had completely disappeared from his face. He finally understood that Marcus's past wasn't some exaggerated story. This man had been part of something real, something dangerous. Marcus walked toward the workbench and removed his grease-covered jacket. Derek watched silently. You going back? He asked. Marcus stopped. I don't know. Derek looked at him. You trained him? Yes. And now he's missing? Yes. Derek swallowed. Then you have to go. Marcus glanced at him. You don't understand. Derek shook his head. Maybe I don't. He looked down at the floor. But I understand what it means when someone you trained is in trouble. Marcus studied him. For the first time, Derek sounded less like a fighter and more like a human being. Harold's phone rang again. He answered. His expression changed. They found the vehicle. Marcus turned immediately. Way. Harold covered the phone. An abandoned industrial site. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Anyone with him? Unknown. Marcus reached for his old canvas bag beneath the workbench. Derek noticed the sudden change. The quiet mechanic was gone. In his place stood someone different. His movements became precise, focused, controlled. He checked equipment without hesitation. Harold watched him. It's been a long time. Marcus nodded. Too long. Derek stepped forward. I'm coming. Marcus looked at him. No, I can help. You don't know what you're walking into. Derek didn't back down. Then teach me. Marcus stared at him. The words reminded him of something. Years ago, Daniel had said almost exactly the same thing. Marcus looked away. Stay hey. Derek shook his head. You just told me talent without discipline becomes arrogance. Marcus looked back. Derek continued. So teach me the discipline. Marcus remained silent. Then his phone rang. He answered. A distorted voice came through the line. Marcus Hale. Marcus's face hardened. Who's asking? The voice replied. We know where your student is. A pause. Come alone. The line went dead. Marcus slowly lowered the phone. Harold looked at him. What did they say? Marcus grabbed his jacket. They're expecting me. And somewhere far away, someone who knew Marcus's old identity was waiting for the man the world thought had disappeared. The rain had stopped by the time Marcus stepped outside. The town was quiet. Too quiet. He stood beside his old pickup, staring through the windshield while Harold loaded a few supplies into the back. Derek remained near the garage. Marcus had told him to stay. But Derek wasn't listening. I'm coming, he said again. Marcus closed the truck door. No. Derek walked closer. You need someone who can move fast. I need someone who can follow instructions. Derek stopped. Marcus looked directly into his eyes. This isn't a tournament. There are no referees. No rules. No second chances. Derek nodded. I understand. Marcus studied him. Then he noticed something different. Derek wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was ready to listen. Marcus finally opened the passenger door. Get in. Derek stared at him. Seriously. Before I change my mind. Derek climbed inside. Harold watched them leave. For the first time, he smiled. Maybe you needed him after all. Hours later, Marcus and Derek arrived at the abandoned industrial site. The buildings were dark. Broken windows reflected the moonlight. Marcus killed the engine. Derek reached for the door. Marcus grabbed his arm. Wait. Derek froze. Marcus listened. Nothing. Then, a faint metallic sound echoed from somewhere inside the building. Marcus whispered, 3 men. Derek looked surprised. How do you know? Marcus pointed toward the entrance. 1 loose chain, 2 sets of footsteps, and someone trying very hard not to breathe. Derek stared at him. Marcus stepped out. They moved through the darkness. Inside, they found Daniel tied to a chair. Blood covered one side of his face. His eyes opened. Marcus. Marcus immediately moved toward him. Daniel smiled weakly. I knew you'd come. Marcus cut the restraints. Who did this? Daniel looked past him. There's still hay. A gunshot suddenly shattered the darkness. Marcus pulled Derek down. Another shot struck the wall. Move. They took cover behind a concrete pillar. Derek's breathing accelerated. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. Control it. Derek nodded. Remember what I taught you. Marcus peeked around the pillar. 3 armed men moved through the warehouse. Derek whispered, What do we do? Marcus looked at him. You wanted discipline. Derek nodded. Then trust me. They moved together. Not recklessly. Not loudly. Precisely. Within seconds, Marcus had neutralized the first attacker. Derek handled the second. The third ran. Marcus chased him into the loading area. The man turned. Marcus stopped. The attacker stared at him, then smiled. You're still alive. Marcus recognized the voice. His expression changed. You. The man laughed. Your students always wondered why you disappeared. Marcus stepped forward. The man raised his hands. You weren't hiding from them, Marcus. He smiled. You were hiding from yourself. Marcus said nothing. Behind him, Derek and Daniel approached. Daniel whispered, Sir, that's the man who betrayed our unit. Marcus looked at him, then at the enemy. For 12 years, Marcus had believed his old life was finished. Now he understood the truth. It had only been waiting. He looked at Derek. You still think I'm just a mechanic? Derek shook his head. No, sir. Marcus smiled. Good. Then he turned toward the man who had dragged him back into the past. Because we're not finished yet. And that night, the quiet mechanic finally stopped hiding. The legend everyone thought was gone had returned.